Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or a personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalon Johnson. My guest today is Dr. Thema Bryant. Dr. Thema is a licensed psychologist, ordained minister, sacred artist, professor, and one of the nation's most influential voices at the intersection of mental health, spirituality, and social justice. Dr. Thema is the past president of the American Psychological Association and currently serves as a tenured professor at Pepperdine University, where she directs the Culture and Trauma Research Laboratory. Dr. Thema's work focuses on helping individuals and communities recover from trauma, grief, abuse, and oppression, with a deep emphasis on embodied healing, emotional justice, and reclaiming joy. Dr. Thema holds a PhD in clinical psychology from Duke University and completed her postdoctoral training at Harvard Medical Center's Victim of Violence program. Early in her career, she served as coordinator at Princeton University's SHARE program, supporting survivors of sexual assault and identity-based harassment. Since then, her career has bridged clinical science, sacred wisdom, cultural advocacy, and soul-level transformation. As a sought-after speaker and media contributor, Dr. Tamer's work has been featured on Oprah's Super Soul podcast, CNN, OWN, BET, The Mel Robbins Show, The New York Times, Psychology Today, and Essence. Her best-selling book, Homecoming, has been translated into multiple languages and continues to resonate with readers around the world. Her latest book, Matters of the Heart, offers practical guidance for cultivating emotional availability, healthier relationships, and deeper self-connection. Dr. Thema's leadership and scholarship have earned her the Sullivan Lifetime Achievement Award for Social Justice, the Distinguished Allyship Award from the Society of Indian Psychologists, and the International Psychology Award for contributors to global psychology and gender. In addition to her academic and clinical accomplishments, Dr. Thema is an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, where she leads the mental health ministry at First AME Church in South Los Angeles. Dr. Thema is also a sacred artist who integrates dance, poetry, and storytelling into her healing practice, offering people not only transformation, but information. Whether in classrooms, pulpits, therapy practice, or on global stages, Dr. Thema's work reminds us that healing is not a betrayal of our people. It is a return to our power. And with every word she speaks, every space she enters, and every person she holds, she helps us remember that we don't have to earn our healing. We simply have to come home to it. So, Dr.
Woo!
Thema,
I love that introduction. Thank you for having me. That was beautifully said.
you're so very welcome, and thank you for being here. And also, I did give a brief introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to who and where you are today?
Certainly. So, my parents gave me the name Thema, which is the West African name, which means queen. And I love that they gifted me with that name because I like to say, half jokingly, even if people underestimate me, or even if they are dishonoring when they say my name, they are forced to honor me.
Mm.
And so I appreciate that. My middle name is Simone, named after Nina Simone. And so my love of the arts, I'll say, got stamped on with my naming at birth. I am the daughter of two ministers. My mom transitioned last year as a result of breast cancer, but spent her life committed to ministry for women. So it's not by accident that a large part of my work has focused on gender as well as race and religion and all of the different aspects of ourselves. But I've done a lot of work in particular with girls and women. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, for the most part, and have a great love for the city, for our people who are there in large numbers, and really have a heart for community, not only community trauma and stress, but community healing and thinking about the collective. In When I was 14, my dad was elected to be a bishop in the AME Church, which is the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And as a result, our family moved to Liberia, West Africa, although we are African American. And so getting to see the world beyond Baltimore is a
Mhm.
big part of my identity, a big part of my appreciation. And one final piece I'll say is I think as a result of my parents being so committed to community uplift, that has been a big part of my heart for liberation psychology, which really uh, highlights the importance of us not only working one on one, but how do we get information and uplift and empowerment to entire communities. So that's a part of who I am. I'm also a mom, and that's a joyful part of my identity.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You
And I love the fact that you wholeheartedly accept the fact that the meaning of your name is what it is, and
Yes,
that people have to recognize that even if they are
right.
trying to be disrespectful, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Just say, look, I can't stand that queen. Okay.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for that. And
You're
before we
welcome.
get into all that you've done, I want to start with the person behind it all. So I wanted to ask you, who are you behind closed doors when it's just Tama? And as you know yourself and your body and in your spirit.
Yes. Uh, at my core, I'm a dancer. So I love dancing, even when no one's watching, because for me, it's not about people watching. Along with being a dancer, I am contemplative. I early on had a poem I wrote, and a line of it said, "I love silence the way some people love music." And I'm good with quiet. I love music as well, but I think the silence is also a retreat for writers. So I enjoy writing and reading, and I also have a beautiful tribe of sisters here in Los Angeles, which is where I live. So to know me, I would say, in addition to knowing my family or my community or that I'm a healer, I do think the people you choose to do life with reflect something about you. And I have a dynamic sisterhood. So, yeah, my tribe reflects me well.
That's beautiful. Thank you. What was your biggest motivation to get to where you are today? And would you say that you've met or exceeded all your goals and expectations?
Uh, I definitely exceeded the goals I had set early. So even, becoming president of the American Psychological Association was not one of my goals. So my goal was to become the president of the Society for the Psychology of Women. And I did that at 34. So I was like, I'm finished. I did it. And that presidential term went very well. That division is a section of APA, and so after that is when people started encouraging me to run. But initially, I wasn't interested. So I was like, I wanted to do what I did, and then, like I did it.
Mhm.
So it was interesting because every so often people would circle back and ask if I uh, would be willing to run. And the time they circled back that led to my yes, we were in the pandemic. And so we had both trauma of the pandemic and the trauma that was birthing Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate. And so, to be honest, I looked at the people who had already announced they were running and didn't feel they spoke to those issues in the ways that aligned with me. So it felt like this is the time. And so I ran, and it was the time.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I know that as growth and expansion happens, that sometimes the people closest to us or that have known us the longest can sometimes have the hardest time seeing who we've become and maybe our biggest critics. And the most reluctant receivers aren't always strangers, but family. So I'm curious, how has your family responded to who you are now? Do they receive you freely, or is it sometimes easier for them to listen when the message comes from somebody else?
It's a great question. And I'm so glad that I have lived long enough to see, I'm really going to say, all of my family in various ways integrate mental health in what they do, like, and to understand it, to have an appreciation for it, uh, in religious spaces and faith-based spaces. That didn't start off as the case. That it was, more of what people usually think about: pray about it, just leave it at the altar. And so it was less. So I actually think it helped that the message was coming from me, because they love me. So, and also, I think starting to make connections with what, we have experienced in our own family and community. So I'll share, growing up, my mother had undiagnosed, untreated depression and anxiety. And so it was not until um, I was a young adult, probably in graduate school myself, that she started to get the care that she deserved and needed. So I think the need for mental health awareness was always there. And perhaps um, uh, what may have started as like either a tolerance or an affirmation of me as an individual, like whatever you pick will be nice, right?
Mhm.
But then really starting to recognize the need for it. And it was very special that they were able to come. My presidential convention was in Washington, D.C., and my family came in and got to see it. So that was beautiful.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. I
Mhm.
think maybe a good majority of our mothers
Yeah.
or grandmothers or
Uh-huh.
grandfathers or fathers probably had
Yes.
undiagnosed depression and anxiety.
That's
And that's because they had to survive through the civil
yeah.
rights era,
Right.
through, being a few generations out of slavery.
Mhm.
There
Mhm.
there really was no room to rest or
Right.
to feel.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we integrate mental and emotional health
Mhm.
into our spirituality.
Yeah.
And that leads perfectly into my next question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your faith to you, and what does it mean to have the opportunity to blend spirituality with mental and emotional health?
10 out of 10. uh, it's crucial for me. I think about psychology and therapy as a faith walk, right? It is the ability to believe that I can have more and be more than I am right now. And sometimes that has to be a real act of faith, because perhaps what I am trying to get to is something I have never had before, maybe never even seen it up close. So, but like we would say, like faith the size of a mustard seed, that there's a little part of me that believes, that hopes that I could grow from this, that I could heal from this, that I could transcend this. Uh, so it's what feeds my hope, um, for myself and for the collective, for humanity.
Mm,
Mhm.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
You also completed your postdoc at the Victims of Violence program at Harvard, the same program that um, was co-founded by the legendary Dr. Judith Herman.
Yes.
How did that experience shape the way you hold trauma today, especially for those whose pain isn't always visible or whose stories challenge dominant systems?
Yes. So I had a beautiful full circle moment earlier this year. There was a huge trauma conference in Boston, and she was
Mhm.
the opening keynote, and I was the midday keynote. And it was like, wow, this this is amazing. Because literally, met her in my early 20s when I was just training and just getting my start. Uh, so I uh, would say her work was one of the introductions to not only doing individual or family work around trauma, but group work, and incorporating the different themes that are needed. When we're processing our shame and anger, and our sense of ourselves, our reconnection with our bodies. Um, and I would say the attention to marginalized identities or culture probably came from my own community background, and then maybe weaving the two, which is why at Pepperdine, where I teach, my laboratory is the Culture and Trauma Research Lab. And so, considering the ways in which who we are affects our risk for trauma, the way other people respond to us, and our healing process.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. And I had the pleasure of having Dr. Herman on my show as well. And her work is just, I mean,
Amazing,
amazing,
right?
second to none. Yeah,
Mm.
she is a true hero, true
Yes,
hero.
yes.
So we talked a little bit about your titles and your credentials, but I want to go back a little bit further, because before you were a professor or a president or a psychologist, you were a little black girl growing up, absorbing the world and learning what it meant to feel safe, what it meant to, what it was like to feel safe, and what it was like to not feel safe.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask you, who was that little girl and what was her world like?
It's a good question. Um, I was observant. Um, I was what people would call a sensitive child.
Mm.
And usually when people say that, they don't mean it in as a compliment, right? They're like,
Right.
"Oh, like she's too sensitive." Uh, and for what I have been called to do in my life, that sensitivity is a gift, right? Is an asset. So I was one who noticed, um, like who was rejected, who was silenced, who was bullied. Um, I paid attention to that because there were parts of me that could relate to that. And so I would say feeling things deeply, um, would uh, tears could come easily, and uh, but also, so there are different domains of self-esteem. So I would say around like academics, I always felt capable, and I attribute that in part to, my parents being very affirming and, not only saying you're smart, but like preparing me. In the summer, I have one brother. In the summer, my brother and I would have to do like book reports on an African nation. We'd have to like memorize this super long poem. Like they were intentional about kind of feeding our minds. Um, and also very early on, my mother bought us both journals. So it's not a surprise that my brother and I have both written books. Um, so yeah, I was a writer early, um, and an observant, sensitive soul.
You mentioned that your mom has already transitioned,
Yeah.
and from the way you describe the preparation that she put into
Mhm.
you and your brother, it seems like she was very intentional.
Yes.
Um, If you had an opportunity to sit across from her right now,
Mhm.
what would you want her to know?
Thank you, Ma. I got it. I got it.
Mhm.
I got it. And I'm grateful for the sacrifices known and unknown. Thankful for you being intentional. Thankful that, as you said in one of your teachings, that as a mother, sometimes you have to fight yourself, that you just want to stay in the bed or lay on the couch, and you fought yourself to show up for us. And so I'm grateful and hope you
Mhm.
are and know you are. I want to say you're resting with ease, but I don't even feel that. I feel she's very busy. Very busy, still getting things done.
Thank you for sharing that, and I know I'm grateful for what she did,
Yeah,
and instilling these principles and, intentionality into you, and I'm sure the world is too because we all benefit from it, so thanks, mom.
thank you. Yay.
Um, you have helped so many people find their way back to themselves, um, and I know that that guidance doesn't come from just textbooks, it comes from a walked road.
Yeah.
Is there a particular moment that comes to mind that stands out for you as calling you back to yourself?
A moment There have been multiple homecomings for me, and one, a more recent one that stands out is the pandemic because it forced me to be still, you know? And, when you're busy and when your coping strategy is productivity, right? Then people don't often recognize that. It's like, you're just doing. And that can be a way of like managing life or doing life. And so then suddenly, like everything shut down, right? And required a stillness. And I would say even when the quote unquote world opened back up, having to be much more intentional about what do I pick back up and what do I leave. um, and it was during the pandemic was the first time I put the sign up on my website saying I wasn't taking any new clients. And, before that, that would be unheard of. I would just keep going. And it really was like, it's too much. It's too, especially because everyone knows your home. So they're like, why can't you jump on? Why can't you squeeze me in? And to be able to release, because I think especially because a lot of times in our community, there's been a stigma about seeking help. So then if people were seeking help, I would feel like a responsibility to take people on when really I was at capacity. Um, and so I also learned what should have been obvious, which is I started referring people to my former students. And like at the start of the pandemic, these are students who might have had former students who might have had like 3 clients. And I'm like, here you go, here you go. And so it's a win-win for everybody. But relieving myself of the idea, which is a falsehood, but the idea that I had to or that I could carry it all.
Mhm.
So yeah, slowing down.
You can't pour from an empty cup is one of
That's
my
right.
favorite sayings.
Yes, yes.
And I think culturally, we received the message early on that being busy
Mhm.
or just doing as much as we can is a
Yeah.
way of taking care of others.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if we had to love our neighbors the way we loved ourselves, and then we look at the way we love ourselves,
Huh.
what would that
Neglect.
really show us? Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And as Black people, we carry so much, and not
Yeah.
just individually, but generationally.
Mhm.
And we're often taught that survival is healing, that being strong, getting through, and keeping the faith is enough.
Yeah.
But survival and wholeness are not the same thing. So I want to ask you, what makes healing particularly hard for Black people, and not just logistically, but emotionally, spiritually, and culturally?
Yeah. Healing is hard for Black people because the trauma hasn't stopped. So when the term post-traumatic stress disorder was developed, it was developed for veterans, and the idea was they go to battle, or persons who at that time enlisted, when they come back from battle, then they receive the care. But when you are an oppressed person, a marginalized person, some have said the term should be continuous traumatic stress, right? Because the preface is supposed to be, now that I'm safe, let me heal. But when you are in an environment where racism is still very pervasive, uh, then you can't totally let your guard down in the way that you could if we were in a different time, space, and circumstance. It reminds me of, I was working with a refugee who, came to the States, and before she came, she had been sexually assaulted in her home country. And we were in one of our first sessions, and she said to me, and it was like a difficult question, because she said, um, "Is it safe here? Do they rape people here?" Right? So maybe I can say it's safer, right? Maybe it's not happening in the way it was where she escaped from, but it would be like a false narrative for me to say, "Oh, no, 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 like, we don't have any of that here. You could relax," right? Uh, so when your survival still requires a certain level of vigilance, um, then, it's almost like the difference between, if I'm working with someone who has escaped an abusive relationship versus working with someone who's still in it, right? It's very different.
I think a lot of the conversation focuses on how we manage instead of how we heal. Like a lot of us don't even understand the nervous system or what trauma really is. So how can, like, for instance, the client that you were speaking about, what did her life experience do to her nervous system, and what happens to somebody who experiences those same things, and what do they feel in their body?
Yeah. So, trauma, as traumatic stress, as opposed to kind of daily stressors, overwhelms your usual capacity to cope. We all have stress, and usually the stress is connected to your different roles, your role in your family, your role at work, or your role as a student. And, although it can be challenging, you usually figure out a way to do your roles. And then there are those events that overwhelm your usual capacity. John Breer talks about it disrupting your sense of yourself, it making it difficult for you to regulate your emotions. We're talking about like our nervous system, and it making it difficult to build and maintain relationships. Because trust, when it's interpersonal trauma as opposed to like a natural disaster, that trust has been broken. And so when we think about healing, many Western, US based, European based models of trauma recovery end with coping and meaning making. That's usually kind of like the end of the journey. When we look at liberation models, we would say it's not only for us to cope with it, but for us to resist, or for us to uh, imagine and move towards our liberation, not just coping from what other people have done. So the way I capture that is, trauma affects you, but it doesn't define you. So there is more to you than what other people have done to you. And so wanting to cultivate that.
What do you think we're still not allowed to say, even in spaces that claim to be about healing? Because when we talk about generational legacies and generational trauma, it's still kind of taboo because,
Mhm.
you might have what we may consider the cycle breakers, who are this generation trying to tell 2 or 3 generations before them that they don't have to live this way, or they can change the way they feel or think about certain things, but there's still that clashing. Why do you think that is?
So my first answer was uh, what we're not at all to say in the larger society, and then I'll go to within our society, within our community. So in the larger society, there is actually uh, efforts to make it illegal for us to talk about intergenerational trauma and historical trauma. That when we talk about our intergenerational historical collective trauma, then that gets called divisive. Then that gets called reverse racism. Then that gets called playing the victim or playing the race card and making people feel bad. That literally, in some states in the U.S., Florida, uh, that is the bar is if you tell any part of our history in a way that makes some people feel bad, then you have broken the law, that you have, broken the rule, and that there will be consequences like people losing their jobs. So uh, that's a part of uh, the national, federal level gaslighting that is happening in terms of the denial that silence is patriotic, is the way that story gets told. So then within our community, what are the things that it's still not okay to talk about? A lot of people don't want us to talk about our pains because their way of coping was you don't talk about it, you pray and move forward. So, and so they're not trying to be punitive. They're trying to teach us what worked for them and what they had access to. So for them, it wasn't like, go sit down and talk to a stranger, it was take it to the Lord in prayer and keep it moving. Right. Or, you don't think about it, don't talk about it. So um, it is hard for people to know how to respond with support to a wound that they never received support from, right? So let's say a mother, a grandmother was sexually assaulted, and then their child is, and their child comes and tells them this horrific thing, but in their life experience, they have never seen what it looks like to really tend to someone's wound beyond telling them it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. So, stop crying. It's going to be all right. So, it requires us giving our elders the care for the wounds they've been carrying for decades and the wounds that they inherited, for us to, yes, our generation heal, but also to look the generations before us and generations after us to have a new legacy where there is the space to recognize we are worthy of care.
That was beautifully said. Thank you. One thing that I notice is that those wounds that were never tended to are
Yeah.
so heavily guarded and protected that even talking about something that may have happened to them can make them feel the feelings of what happened, or the
Yes.
neglect of what
Right.
they didn't get because of what happened.
Hmm.
And I think a way that a lot of them coped was church or
Hmm.
spirituality. And
Hmm.
so I want to ask this question because this is something that I have been thinking about lately. And that's if someone grew up emotionally numb or disconnected or had traumatic experiences, but they finally felt safe at church. The idea of church or church may be the only place where they're able to feel safe feeling their feelings or where emotions are allowed.
Hmm.
If that has become the case for somebody, how do we help people carry that capacity into the rest of their lives so that they don't have to wait until Sunday to feel whole or to cry without shame?
Beautiful, beautiful. One is to make sanctuaries real sanctuaries. So, in a real sanctuary, the full person, including their experiences, is welcomed. In a real sanctuary, people's wounds are not ignored or covered up. There's actual healing taking place. So, one, talking about mental health in sermons. And it's not a stretch. I say anybody who is like preaching from these narratives, despair and fear, it's all in there. So it's to name those things, and then a number of churches have opened counseling centers or counseling ministries. Sometimes it's volunteers who are, we call it lay healers, but some of them have centers with actual licensed mental health professionals. So that's one way of it feeling more accessible and acceptable to people. Um, but I think it's also, the practical ministry of like, as you're naming, I don't just want to give you like a glimmer of joy in these 2 hours or 90 minutes, but to be able to disseminate information in that time that can actually carry people and that can be applied throughout their week.
Mm. I think that learning emotional safety can be difficult for people who generationally have never felt it or have
Mm.
never felt it in their family system, or the legacies that were handed down to them was avoidance, or we don't talk about that, or we
Mhm.
skip over things that make us feel. How do you help people unlearn the belief that trauma is something that you just get over instead of something that you walk with and tend to and slowly release?
Yeah. I think we first celebrate the strengths and wisdom of what helped people to make it. Because I think if we start with the like, you're doing it all wrong and here's the right way, you know, then the people will dismiss us. One, it feels disrespectful, and two, they'll figure we don't know what we're talking about. So I start with the affirmation of uh, it's incredible what you have survived. And I know that to survive those things, you had to use some strategies. And one of those strategies, it looks like, was to stay busy. So I'm glad you gave yourself that. That's what you needed to get through that season. And what I like to say is the ways we survived are not always the ways we want to live, right? So, if you grew up in a community where there was a lot of violence, then it was good you learned how to fight. And it's good that you learned to hit first, right? So they're not going to catch you slipping. That's awesome. That's how you got through there. But you don't actually live there anymore, or you live there, but now you're 40. So maybe the strategy at 20, you don't want to still do at 45. So, you can appreciate your younger self for getting you through it. And now let's think about some other ways of being.
Mm. So spot on. Because, like I said, if you grew up in a place where you had to fight and you had to
Mhm.
learn to hit first,
Yeah.
you were surviving. You had to do what you had to do.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you are now, let's say, employed at a nursing home,
Yes. And around fighting everybody, just going off on people.
right? Like you can't be fighting the elderly
Yes.
people you're caring to,
That's
or
right. That's
punching your
right.
coworkers, because that doesn't work.
Yes. It doesn't work. Now it's self-sabotage. What was survival can become self-sabotage because you're
Right.
applying it in the wrong setting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Amen. I
Mhm.
want to talk about your book, Homecoming.
Yes.
What does homecoming actually mean to you, and what called you to write it?
Yeah. Homecoming is to tell myself the truth and then live based on that truth. So trauma and stress disconnect me from myself. So then I'm not really at home within myself. I am in survival mode. I'm anticipating what other people want and I'm giving it to them. So then other people are my home, right? Other people are my compass. But to come home means I'm living my authentic life. I'm living from a place of truth. And I can't live a truth until I've told it to myself, because sometimes we lie to ourselves, say we're fine when we're not, say something is good when it's not. So that radical truth telling to myself and in every setting, meaning, yeah, I could be at home within myself when no one else is here, which is good because some people, even when they're by themselves, they don't feel settled. But to be able to be myself, you know, whoever is around requires that kind of self acceptance where it's okay if some people don't get me or some people don't like me or some people don't agree. That's okay versus perpetually censoring myself, looking for everyone's approval.
That can be hard if you grew up having to work for love or if love was
Yes.
conditional because you had to play a role in order to get
Yes,
your needs met. And
that's right.
even those quote unquote needs that were getting met weren't your actual needs. So
Right.
you may not know who you are or
Yeah.
how to be settled within yourself. So it's
Hmm.
difficult work. It really
Right. It
is.
is very challenging and it feels risky because it is risky. Like I'm going off script. I'm not just agreeing with everything everybody says, right? I have a different perspective or a different thought, or I want to share what I feel. So there's risk involved. I like to say a part of healing that doesn't get acknowledged is healing is not always comfortable. It's growing pains because the ways we have learned to survive are what we're used to. So either I'm used to shutting down or I'm used to going off on people. Like I don't even think about it. It is what I do. And so when I decide I want to try it differently, then it's going to feel awkward. But the awkwardness is the healing.
Well
Yeah.
said. Now you have your book Matters of the Heart.
Mhm.
And that book is about emotional availability, intimacy, and the work of becoming ready for the kind of connection we say we want. So,
I
how
love
do you
it.
know it
We
was
say
time
we
to
want.
write this one? How'd you know it was time to write this book?
Yeah. So homecoming is very internally focused, but one of the big predictors of how we do in the world is what we call social support. It just means your relational life. And uh, sometimes people have become so focused on their interior, on their mind, their feelings, that they lack the capacity or were never given the skills to develop friendship, to develop romantic relationships, to sustain those. And so I think it's important to share the principles of how do you connect with other people, family, friends, partners, how to do that. So that's what Matters of the Heart helps us with.
Mhm. Thank you for writing the book and for being so in tune with what we all need and may not be able to actually say.
Right. You are welcome. I'm glad to share it.
If you could be known for one thing that would define your legacy, what would you want that to be?
I helped people get free.
Mm,
That's
okay.
what I would like.
Let me ask you this then. Do you think that Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, or Dr. King will be proud of you? And do you think they would look at your work helping people come home to themselves, speaking
Mm.
truth into systems that don't want to hear it and say, yes, you carried this forward?
I love that question. I believe so. I would hope so. And, it's the Harriet Tubman quote of, I could have freed thousands more if they knew they were slaves. And so there is a psychological component to our liberation. And even people who have done work around reparations talk about not just economic reparations, but emotional repair. And so, yes, I do feel that is a part of the liberation movement, is the freeing of our hearts, our minds, our spirits.
Mm. Thank you for that. And I'm glad that you can recognize that the work that you're doing
Mm.
and have done is a continuation of that legacy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. Let me ask you this. With all the work that you're doing to help others, what is it that you want people to know most?
Uh, I would want people to know most that you are worthy, worthy of care, worthy of healing, worthy of love, worthy of liberation. You're worthy.
Mm. That can be so challenging to receive
Yeah.
if you've got the message
That
your
you're
whole
not.
life that you're not worthy.
Mhm.
And even if it didn't come from within your family system, but it came
Yeah.
from within your school
Yeah.
or from the news or
Yeah.
from your community, the way your community is treated.
Yeah.
But I think it's most important to recognize and realize that not everything we've been told is the truth.
Yes. Correct.
Mhm.
One of my dear friends, Asia Adebo, is a poet, and she has a line out of her poem, Who Lied? Who lied to you? And to know people have been invested in lying to you to convince you that you were inadequate and unworthy because they had the mistaken belief that their freedom required your bondage. And it's not true.
Wow, that's deep. All right, last question for you, Dr. Thema.
Mm-hmm.
If you could use your platform to educate anyone who might be struggling with their mental or emotional health and might be uncertain of how or where to start, what would you say?
Start by telling yourself the truth and speaking the truth to someone you trust. So if someone you trust and care about asks you how you are, you don't just have to say fine and you. You don't have to just say blessed and highly favored,
Mhm.
that you can speak the truth. And as I start to just tell myself and others the truth, the healing begins.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for this, for your time, for being willing to come on my show and share your wisdom and your knowledge. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be able to host you and to hold space for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been magnificent. I really enjoyed your questions and appreciate your heart for healing for yourself and then through this podcast for others. So thank you for being you.
I appreciate that. If people want to find you online or on social media, where can they find you?
Yes, my website is drtema.com. That's Thema. And I'm Dr. Tama on Instagram and on TikTok more newly.
Mhm.
And I guess that's threads as well.
All right, perfect. And then where can people find your books?
You can get my books wherever books are sold, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, and we really encourage people to use independent small bookstores as well to be able to support them and keep them alive.
Perfect. Well, again, Dr. Tama, thank you so much for this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for how you do it.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful.